Before we dive into this story, I need to ask, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments right now. I'm so curious to know how far this story will reach, because trust me, this one, it stayed with me, and I think it might just stay with you too. It started on a stretch of highway I thought I knew like the back of my hand, but sometimes getting lost leads you exactly where you're meant to be. I always thought I had a good sense of direction. I'm the type of woman who prefers paper maps over phone apps, who remembers landmarks, who knows how to trust her gut. But that afternoon, somewhere just past exit 89, my gut must have been taking a nap. Joseph, my son, had been the one driving. He insisted. I used to drive everywhere, but at 67, I admit my reflexes aren't what they used to be. He says it's about safety, but I know it's about care. He doesn't want to say it out loud, but I hear it in his voice. I see it in how gently he reaches for the keys when I pull them from my purse. He'd picked me up for a weekend visit, just the two of us. No kids, no partners, just mother and son on a small road trip out to the coast. We hadn't done something like this in years. Not since he was in his 20s. Life moves quickly once jobs, marriages, and children take the stage. You don't realize how far you drift until you're suddenly sitting across from your own child at a diner and realizing you don't know what kind of music they listen to anymore. The sun had started to dip low, painting the sky with a kind of orange that made the edges of the clouds glow like embers. I remember because Joseph had turned down the radio and said, "Look at that, Mom. Don't see skies like that in the city." I'd smiled. Makes getting a little lost worth it. Because yes, we were lost. The GPS had taken us on some strange detour, insisting a particular route would save us 10 minutes. 10 minutes we never got back. The highway stretched into unfamiliar fields and silos, fences eaten away by time, roads that felt too quiet. Every few miles we passed a gas station that looked like it hadn't seen a customer since the 90s. Still, I wasn't nervous. Not really. Not yet. We drove in silence for a bit. I could hear the low hum of the tires on the road and the occasional creak from the dash. Joseph's profile in the soft light reminded me of his father. Strong jaw, slightly furrowed brow, that same quiet focus. But there was something else in his expression that night, something unsettled. He wasn't fidgeting, exactly, but he kept adjusting his grip on the wheel as if working up to something. "Mom," he said suddenly, glancing at me, then back to the road. "Can I ask you something?" I turned toward him, curious. "Of course. You know you can." There was a pause. A thick one. Long enough that I started to wonder if I should press. But I waited. "I've been thinking a lot about when I was a kid," he said finally. "Like the kind of mom you were. The things you gave up. That caught me off guard. Not in a bad way, just no one ever asks about those things, especially not your own children. You assume they don't notice. Or worse, they forget." "I didn't give up anything I wasn't willing to," I said. "You were the best thing I ever did." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, but you did give up things. Dad, he wasn't always fair to you. Even I knew that back then." That hit harder than I expected, not because it was untrue, but because he saw it. I looked out the window for a second, needing a breath. "You were just a boy, Joseph. You shouldn't have had to carry that." "I know," he said softly, "but I did, and I'm not a boy anymore." He pulled off to the shoulder without warning. We were in the middle of nowhere, nothing but trees, distant hills, and a faded metal fence that ran along the right side of the road, the kind of place you wouldn't normally stop. But he parked the car and turned to me, his hands resting in his lap, still and serious. "I don't think I ever said thank you," he continued, "for staying, for keeping the house steady when everything felt like it was breaking apart, for putting me first." I stared at him. This man, my son, and in that moment, I didn't see the kid who scraped his knees or the teenager who slammed his door. I saw someone who had been watching all along, someone who had carried things I never meant for him to carry. And now he was trying to put some of that down. "You don't have to thank me," I whispered, "but I'm glad you did." His eyes glossed over, and mine probably did too. We didn't cry, not yet, but the weight of that moment settled heavy and warm between us, like an old quilt pulled up over our shoulders. "I've been thinking about how I want to live differently," he said, "how I want to show up better. For my kids, for myself, I want to break the cycle." I reached for his hand. His fingers were calloused and warm, and he didn't let go. "Then do it, Joseph. You're not your father. You're already better than he ever was." He laughed a little, quietly. "It's weird. I always thought getting older meant understanding everything. But the older I get, the more I realize I'm just starting to really see things." We sat like that for a while, two people in the quiet dusk, headlights off, lost on some forgotten stretch of road, and I wasn't in a hurry to be found. That evening, we never did get back to our hotel on time. By the time we rolled into the small town nearby, the restaurants had all closed. We ate crackers and peanut butter from the gas station and laughed like teenagers in the motel room. But something shifted that night. He saw me, not just as Mom, not just as the woman who packed lunches and cleaned messes. He saw the full version of me. And I saw him too, not just the son I raised, but the man he was still becoming. And that's how life is, sometimes. You take a wrong turn, miss your exit, and end up somewhere far more meaningful than your destination. The next morning, sunlight poured through the cheap motel curtains like it had something to prove. Harsh and golden, it painted the carpet with crooked lines and made everything feel warmer than it should have. I lay there for a while, eyes half open, listening to Joseph's slow, steady breathing from the other bed. We hadn't spoken much after that conversation the night before, not because it was uncomfortable, but because it was enough. There's something sacred about moments like that. You don't need to keep digging. You just sit in it, let it settle. I turned my head slightly and looked at him. Still asleep, one arm flung over his eyes like he used to do as a boy when the morning light hit his face. It struck me then how peaceful he looked, like a man who'd finally let go of something heavy. I sat up slowly, bones creaking in protest, and shuffled to the bathroom. I caught my reflection in the mirror, and for a moment I didn't recognize myself. My hair was tousled, my cheeks faintly puffy from sleep, but it was the look in my eyes that surprised me. There was softness, stillness, a quiet kind of relief. After I washed up, I made coffee in the small machine by the sink, if you could call it that. It tasted like burnt cardboard, but I wasn't picky. I held the warm styrofoam cup in both hands, savoring the moment. Joseph stirred a while later. "Smells like disappointment," he groaned, rolling over. I chuckled. It's motel coffee, not a miracle. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. "I slept like a rock." "Yeah, you needed it," I said. "You've been carrying a lot lately." He glanced at me, then down at his hands. "You always do that. Just no things." I shrugged. "Mothers notice, even when you think we don't." After we packed up and checked out, we got back on the road. The GPS had sorted itself out, and the path ahead was clear now. But the car felt different, like something had shifted between us. Not in a bad way, just deeper, quieter. We drove in comfortable silence for miles, just the hum of the road and the occasional hawk gliding overhead. Eventually he asked, "Do you ever regret staying?" I knew what he meant. "With your father," I said. He nodded, eyes fixed on the road. I took a breath. Regret is complicated, Joseph. There were years I felt stuck. Years I wanted to scream. But I also had you. You were my reason to stay grounded. He was quiet for a moment. You could have left, though. You had every right. I know, I said. But back then, leaving felt harder than staying. And maybe I wasn't ready. Sometimes you don't realize you're drowning until someone pulls you out. He looked over at me briefly. Was I that someone? You were, I whispered. You just didn't know it. The road curved gently through a line of trees, sun dappling the windshield with flickering light. I could feel something in him softening again. The questions he'd carried for years slowly loosening their grip. I think I used to resent you a little, he said. Not because of anything you did, but because I didn't understand why you let him treat you that way. I nodded, letting the honesty land. I understand. It's okay. I probably would have felt the same. He swallowed hard. It's not fair. You deserved more. We pulled into a small roadside diner just before noon. One of those places where the booths are ripped and the menus are sticky, but the pie is legendary. We found a booth near the window, ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup, just like we used to on rainy days, and sat there like no time had passed at all. You know, he said, stirring his coffee slowly, I've been in therapy for the past year. I blinked, surprised. You have? Yeah. I didn't want to tell anyone at first. It felt private. But I needed to make sense of some things. Needed to understand why I kept repeating patterns I hated. I reached across the table and touched his hand. I'm proud of you. That takes guts. He looked down at our hands. My therapist asked me when I first felt responsible for someone else's feelings, and I told her it was with you. When I was little, I used to listen for your footsteps in the kitchen at night. I could tell if you were sad by how hard your heels hit the floor. My throat tightened. You shouldn't have had to carry that, Joseph. I know, but I did. And for a long time, I thought love meant sacrifice, silence, endurance. That's how you loved. That's how I learned. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I needed to hear this. We both did. I've made mistakes, he continued. In my marriage, with my kids, I get quiet when I should speak. I let things fester. But I'm trying, Mom. I really am. I squeezed his hand. Trying is everything. And Joseph, you're breaking the pattern just by being aware of it. He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed but calm. I think I needed to get lost with you, not just on the highway, in time, in memory, in the stuff we've both tucked away. I smiled. Funny how the road knows what we need before we do. He laughed softly. Yeah, and all because we missed an exit. We spent nearly 2 hours in that booth talking about everything and nothing. About his daughter's science fair project. About my garden. About how people change, slowly and painfully, and then all at once. And when we finally got back in the car and started driving again, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes the road home isn't about distance. It's about truth. The highway stretched out in front of us like a ribbon of possibility. After our long talk at the diner, there was a stillness between us, not the awkward kind, but the kind that settles over people who've said things that needed to be said. Truth has a way of leaving behind a quiet, almost sacred hush. Joseph turned on the radio. An old song from the 70s hummed through the speakers. Something with a slow beat, a nostalgic melody. I recognized it immediately. Fleetwood Mac. "You remember this one?" he asked. I chuckled. "You used to sing the chorus with a mouth full of cereal. You'd get all the words wrong." He laughed and shook his head. "I thought I sounded just like Stevie Nicks." "You didn't," I teased. "Not even close." That got a full, honest laugh out of him. It was good to see that again. To see him not just smile, but really laugh. The kind that softens the lines around his eyes and makes him look young, even if just for a moment. After a while, we passed a sign for a scenic overlook. Joseph glanced over at me. "Wanna pull off for a bit?" "Sure," I said. "We're not in a rush." We parked and got out. The air was different up there, cooler, cleaner. The view was wide and green, stretching far into a valley below, where small houses and farms looked like pieces on a toy set. The sky was still bright, but the sun was starting to drift lower, casting long shadows across the hills. We stood at the edge of the lookout, leaning against the wooden rail. There weren't many people around, just an elderly couple sitting on a bench, holding hands, and a young family unpacking sandwiches from a cooler. "I used to dream about places like this," Joseph said, staring out at the view. "When things were loud at home, I'd close my eyes and imagine being somewhere quiet, somewhere open." I didn't respond right away. I let his words hang in the air, letting them settle. "I used to do the same," I said finally. "But I didn't dream of quiet places. I dreamed of being heard." That surprised him. He looked over at me. "By Dad?" I nodded. "By anyone. I think when you spend years holding things in, it becomes harder to recognize your own voice. You begin to wonder if it was ever there to begin with." He let out a slow breath. "I think I inherited that part of you. The holding it in, not on purpose. It just became a habit." "Maybe," I said gently. "But habits can be broken. You're already doing it." He turned and leaned his back against the railing. "Can I ask you something personal?" I gave a small smile. We're way past the point of polite small talk. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about what your life could have been, if things had been different?" That question landed deep, not because it hadn't crossed my mind before. It had, 1,000 times. But hearing it from him made it feel real in a way it never had before. "I used to," I said, looking out at the horizon. "I used to imagine a version of myself who went to art school, who traveled more, who never settled for half a heart." Joseph was quiet, listening. "But then I think about what I would have missed," I added. "I would have missed you, watching you grow, teaching you how to ride a bike, reading to you when you were sick. I wouldn't trade those memories, not for anything." He nodded slowly. "I guess we all carry the lives we didn't live." "Yes," I said. "But they don't have to weigh us down. They can remind us of what we still have time to find." We sat on a bench after that, watching the sky shift from blue to soft lavender. It felt good to rest, not just our legs, but our hearts. And in that stillness, I realized something else. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to be strong. Not for him, not for anyone. Joseph reached over and held my hand, just like he used to when he was small. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Eventually, we got back in the car and drove in silence. Not the kind of silence that means nothing to say, but the kind that means everything had already been said. We were comfortable in it, like slipping into an old sweater on a cool evening. Later, we checked into a small inn just outside the coast. It had a wraparound porch and flowers in the windowsills. The woman at the front desk gave us cookies with our room keys. The kind of place that felt like someone's home, not a stop on a map. That night, we sat on the porch with tea in hand, wrapped in borrowed blankets, listening to the faint sound of waves crashing in the distance. I watched Joseph staring into the darkness, his shoulders relaxed, his eyes soft. "You know," he said, "I used to think we had nothing left to talk about." I looked over at him. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I think we've only just started." The porch creaked beneath us, and I could feel the air change, the kind of shift that happens when something finally finds its place. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this trip had given us more than either of us expected. It wasn't just about the past, or the things we didn't say for years. It was about what we could still build, from here. The morning air by the coast felt different, saltier, more alive. I could hear the waves even before I opened the curtains, rhythmic and steady like a heartbeat against the shore. When I stepped out onto the small balcony just off our room, the sky was streaked with pale pink and soft gold, and I stood there barefoot for a moment, feeling the worn wood beneath my feet and the chill of the ocean breeze brushing my skin. Joseph was still asleep, sprawled across his bed with the blanket tangled at his feet. He looked younger like that, his face relaxed, his breathing deep and even. There was something tender about watching your grown child sleep. It reminded me of all the times I crept into his room when he was a boy, just to make sure he was still breathing, my heart always full and a little afraid. I pulled on my sweater and stepped quietly down the creaky staircase to the inn's kitchen. The innkeeper, a soft-spoken woman named Lorna, handed me a fresh mug of coffee and a blueberry muffin warm from the oven. I thanked her and sat alone for a bit, watching the morning light stretch across the floor. It felt like a different kind of peace. Not the fragile kind you're afraid will shatter, but the quiet, enduring kind you carry with you when something inside has healed. By the time Joseph came down, the sun was high and the smell of bacon filled the air. "You sleep okay?" I asked, passing him a cup. He nodded, rubbing his eyes. "Better than I have in months." We ate breakfast slowly, not rushing anything, the way you do when you know the moment is more important than the plan. Afterward, we took a walk down to the beach. The sand was cool beneath our feet, the tide low, and we walked side by side with our shoes in hand, letting the waves lap at our ankles. "I was thinking," Joseph said, glancing at me, "about the last time we went to the beach together. Do you remember?" I thought for a second. "The summer after your high school graduation." He smiled. "Yeah, you brought that old striped umbrella, and Dad didn't come. Said he had paperwork." I remembered that day. The way the sun clung to his shoulders, the laughter in his voice. It had been one of the rare times we felt light together, before adulthood crept in, before his own storms started to gather. "You were so full of plans back then," I said. "California, music, freedom." He chuckled. "I thought I had it all figured out." "No one does at 18, I said. "But you had heart. You still do." We stopped walking and stood looking out at the water, the sea stretching wide in front of us. "I want to say something," he said. "And I don't know if I'll say it right, but I've been thinking about it since we got lost on that road." I turned toward him. "Go on." He took a breath. I've spent a lot of years trying to outrun the parts of me I didn't like. The parts I saw in Dad. The silence. The mood swings. The way I'd shut people out without meaning to. And I've hurt people. My wife, sometimes. Even my kids. I reached for his hand, but he kept talking, his voice steady now. I never meant to. But I didn't know how to deal with what I didn't understand. And I think I was scared of ending up like him. "You're not him, Joseph," I said quietly. "You never were." "I know," he said, "but I had to believe it myself. And I think I finally do." He looked down at our hands, my skin softer now, lined with time, and his still strong, but not so guarded anymore. "You gave me more than a safe home," he said. "You gave me an example of resilience, of how to survive pain without turning cruel. You stayed soft, and somehow you still loved." Tears welled in my eyes, hot and unexpected. "I didn't always get it right," I whispered. "No," he said. "But you showed up, and that's more than I realized. It's everything." We stood there in silence, waves rolling in and out, and something inside me shifted, a quiet release. The years of wondering if I did enough, if I mattered, if staying all those years meant anything. And here he was, this grown man beside me, choosing to be better, not out of shame, but out of love. Because he saw me, because he learned from me. We walked back slowly, the sun climbing higher, warming our backs. Later that afternoon, we packed up the car and checked out of the inn. As we pulled out onto the road, the GPS chirped back to life, this time with a clear, straight route ahead. But neither of us seemed to care about the directions anymore. We'd found what we came for, and we hadn't even known we were looking. As the miles rolled by, we talked about little things, books, movies, Joseph's plans to take his daughter to a science museum next weekend. Ordinary things that suddenly felt extraordinary because we weren't just mother and son anymore. We were two people finally meeting in the middle of our story, not just sharing memories, but making new ones. As we neared the outskirts of town, Joseph glanced at me. "I'm glad we got lost, Mom." I smiled, my heart full. Me too. Because sometimes the wrong road leads to the right place. And sometimes getting lost is the only way to find your way back to each other.